Hello, Sanctuary Seekers! My name is Dan, and welcome to the Arena Sanctuary. For those of you that are new, welcome! Let me give you a quick rundown of what we're all about. Here on the Arena Sanctuary, we present a fun and relaxed environment for all things Magic the Gathering Arena. Please remember to click subscribe and the like button. It makes a world of difference for the channel. Before we continue on into the deck tech for this week, I wanted to say thank you. Thank you to the incredible response on the first video. The positivity, the suggestions, and the interactions have meant the world to me, and I deeply appreciate it. Let's get into the deck for this week, Sultai Midrange. Pause for dramatic effect. Let's break down the deck name. Sultai is the magic way to say green, blue, and black, and midrange is the style or archetype that this deck is. Midrange wants to sit right between aggressive decks and control decks. We want to control the early game and then go aggressive with big threats in the mid to late game. How can we do this? Let's introduce our starting lineup. We'll begin with creatures. We run 23 creatures, which is over a third of our deck. These creatures have effects that can help us get to the mid game faster or have extra utility when they enter or other creatures enter the battlefield. First up, 4 Llanowar Elves. A green 1/1 that allows us to tap for green. Llanowar helps us accelerate into the mid-game and puts us ahead of our opponents in terms of mana sources. Llanowar is a great turn 1 play and a good early game play. Later in the game, Llanowar loses its luster as we look to play bigger and beefier creatures. Next up, we have 4 Wildgrowth Walkers. For 1 and a green, we get a 1/3 body that says whenever a creature you control explores, put a +1/+1 counter on Wildgrowth Walker and you gain 3 life. We have 8 creatures in the deck that explore, with 4 of them exploring twice when they enter the battlefield. Within a few turns we can gain 3, 6, even 9 life. We also get a threat that continues to grow and grow. If our opponent is not able to quickly deal with Wildgrowth Walker, we can ball out of control. Next up is 1 Incubation Druid. For 1 and a green for a 0/2 body that has add 1 mana of any type that a land you control could produce. If Incubation Druid has a +1/+1 counter on it, add 3 mana of that type instead. Incubation Druid also has an adapt cost of 3 green for adapt 3. If this creature has no +1/+1 counters on it, put 3 +1/+1 counters on it. Incubation Druid can be a decent mana fixer for us, and a great mana source if we are able to put counters on it. We only have 1 in the deck, as in my opinion, Llanowar provides similar value for 1 mana less. We often don't need the extra mana that Incubation Druid can produce. Next up are 4 Merfolk Branchwalker for 1 and a green for a 2/1 body that says, when Merfolk Branchwalker enters the battlefield, it explores. The explore mechanic is reveal the top card of your library, put that card into your hand if it's a land. Otherwise, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, then put the card back or put it into your graveyard. Branchwalker is one of our enablers for Wildgrowth Walker with the explore mechanic, but also allows us to look through our deck a bit and try to get the answers we need. If we do not hit a land, having Branchwalker come in as a 3/2 for 2 can be great value. Next up are 4 Jadelight Rangers. For 1 green, we get a 2/1 body that says when Jadelight Ranger enters the battlefield, it explores, then it explores again. Hold up. Explore, then explore again? 1 card can find cards for us, gain us 6 life with 1 walker out, and make 1 walker a 3/5. The more Wildgrowth Walkers we have out, the higher the value. Jadelight can be a game changer and a game ender with more than 1 Wildgrowth Walker on the field. For a bit of fun, we throw in 2 Hostage Takers. Hostage Taker is 2 blue-black for a 2/3 body that says when Hostage Taker enters the battlefield, exile another target creature or artifact until Hostage Taker leaves the battlefield. You may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast that spell. We can use Hostage Taker to take a big opponent threat and play it ourselves. The one caveat is that if Hostage Taker is removed before we play the stolen card, that card will return to the battlefield back under opponent's control. And for our finisher, we have 4 Hydroid Crisis. For X green-blue, we get a 0/0 that says when you cast this spell, you gain half X life and draw half X cards, round down each time. Hydroid Crisis enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. Crisis also has flying and trample. Playing an X cost of 4 is where this card gets great value. We get a 4/4 with flying and trample. We also gain 2 life and draw 2 cards. Obviously, the more we spend on X, the better the value. Playing a Crisis where X is 6 or 8 or higher can end games as soon as it hits the battlefield. Let's move on to our instants and sorceries. I've broken them out into 2 sections, removal and utility. Let's start first with removal. We have 1 cast down. For 1 and a black at instant speed, we can destroy target non-legendary creature. Great removal for cheap, and we have a number of targets we can use this on. Next, we have 2 Assassin's Trophy. For black-green at instant speed, we can destroy target permanent and opponent controls. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle their library. This is one of my favorite removal spells in this deck, as this allows us to target any permanent and opponent controls. Enchantment? Done. Creature? Toast. Planeswalker? Nah. Artifact? Land? Get out of here. Finally, for removal, we have 2 Vraska's Contempt for 2 black at instant speed, which says exile target creature or planeswalker, you gain 2 life. Often the 2 biggest threats you'll be dealing with are creatures or planeswalkers, and they can be dealt with Vraska's Contempt, and you quickly gain 2 life out of it. Not bad. For our utility, we run 3 Find Finality, which are both sorceries. Find can be played for Golgari, and gets us return up to 2 target creatures from your graveyard to your hand. We use this if we lose our Wild Growth Walkers quickly so that we can re-enable the Explore synergy from our other cards. Finality is 4 black-green and says you may put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature you control. Then all creatures get -4/-4 until end of turn. Finality is most beneficial to us as a board wipe. Often our creatures will be wiped as well, but we may find a situation where we can save a creature by putting 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature. Next up, let's take a look at our Planeswalkers. First, we run 3 Vivien Reid. Vivien is 3 green for a Planeswalker with 5 loyalty that has 3 abilities. The first ability, her +1, is look at the top 4 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature or land card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. This is really great for us to find the threats that we need, as well as a land if we also need that. -3, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. Vivien's -3 is immediately playable when we play Vivien Reid, and the -3 has a ton of utility. We can get rid of troublesome artifacts or enchantments like Curious Obsession, or destroy that Drake that's getting out of control since it has flying. Vivien's ultimate is her -8. You get an emblem with creatures you control get +2/+2 and have Vigilance, Trample, and Indestructible. If we're able to get to this point with Vivien, we have our opponents in a very difficult situation. All of our creatures getting buffed, having Vigilance so they don't tap, Trample so damage comes through, and Indestructible so they cannot be destroyed, makes our creatures almost unbeatable on the field. Typically with Vivien, we won't get to this point, but it's a nice ultimate to have. Our second Planeswalker is Karn, Scion of Urza, and we run 2. At a cost of 4, Karn is a relatively cheap Planeswalker and has 3 abilities with a loyalty of 5. Karn's +1 is reveal the top 2 cards of your library. An opponent chooses one of them, put that card into your hand and exile the other with a silver counter on it. -1, put a card you own with a silver counter on it from exile into your hand. And Karn's ultimate, -2, create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token with this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. Karn's first 2 abilities are the ones that we want to focus on. The +1 ability allows us to get a card in hand of our opponent's choosing, but the card that they choose to not give us is not lost forever. It goes into exile with a silver counter on it that we can then use Karn's -1 ability to access later in the game as needed. The -2, or the ultimate ability, is not something we'll use very often. We don't run any artifacts, so creating artifact creatures with the creature getting +1/+1 for each artifact is unnecessary for us. For our lands, we run 24 lands as shown here. Let's take a quick look at our sideboard here. Against aggro, what we want to do is bring in Cry of the Canarium and Cast Down so that we can deal with all of aggressive decks' early threats. Against mid-range and in the mirror matchup, what we want to do is counter our opponent's strategy in the mid-game, so we'll bring in Negates, Thief of Sanity so that we can play through their hand, Duress if we want to make sure that their threats are eliminated, and possibly Disdainful Stroke if they're playing big spells. Against Control, which is one of our tougher matchups, we're going to bring in Duress, Thief of Sanity, and Negate. We want to bring in Duress so that we can take a look at their hand and get rid of things that we don't want to see. Negate to counter their non-creature spells since they don't play a lot of creatures. And Thief of Sanity to allow us to look through their deck and play some of their big threats in our favor. Vraska's Contempt can really be used in either the aggro or the mid-range matchup. It depends on if you're playing a lot of Planeswalkers or a lot of creatures. Even in a control matchup like Esper, we can bring in Vraska's Contempt to deal with Teferi. For an extra bit of information, let's take a look at the price list. This includes both the Arena cost as well as the paper cost for this deck. On Arena, you'll have 9 Mythic Rares, 39 Rares, 11 Uncommons, and 18 Commons, and on the paper side, I plugged this deck into TCG Player and came up with a cost of about $430. The cost on both sides is quite prohibitive. With Arena, you can make it by grinding out, but with paper, if you have the cash, you can get it. If you don't, there are ways to make it cheaper, but this is really the most ideal way to play this deck. With that information out of the way, let's take this deck for a spin on the ladder. Welcome to this week's segment of We Play Oppressive Decks, aka Sultai Midrange. We will be on the draw here. Unlike Mono Blue, we don't mind being on the draw. This deck shines in the mid to late game, so going first or second doesn't matter to us. Let's take a look at my opening hand. I have 1 Overgrown Tomb, 1 Forest, 1 Vraska's Contempt, 1 Find Finality, 1 Llanowar Elves, 1 Merfolk Branchwalker, and 1 Vivian Reed. This hand is spicy and I end up keeping. With 3-color decks, it is key to have a minimum 2 colors in hand to make sure you keep as many of your options open as possible. I have no blue spells, so the lack of blue mana is not concerning, and having a Llanowar Elves helps fix some of the mana issues. A Branchwalker on turn 2 will help us thin our deck if necessary with the Explore mechanic. Finding a 3rd land with black opens up Vraska's Contempt, and 5 mana for Vivian means Watch Out World will be bringing Sultai back. Crickets? Let's get back to Magic. Our opponent mulligans, scries, and plays a mountain. No turn 1 play probably eliminates mono red unless he kept a terrible 6-card hand. No face damage yet. We draw a Cast Down, which is excellent removal, and play a forest into Llanowar Elves. Getting ahead helps us play our big threats faster. Our opponent plays an island. Is it Drake's? Phoenix? Oh, the possibilities to make us sad. Our opponent then plays Opt, scries, and draws a card and then passes the turn. We draw Crisis, our big bad finisher. This little guy at the end of the mid-game can swing a game from good to great, or bad to not so bad. We play our Overgrown Tomb tapped. We don't need the mana at the moment, so no use taking some life away. We then play a Branchwalker to explore and find a Llanowar Elves. Another mana dork is not what we need, so we decide to put him in the bin. Branchwalker gets a +1/+1 and we move to pass our turn. Our opponent plays a Goblin Electromancer and passes turn with no land drop. This gives us a lot of information. 1. Our opponent has no lands in hand. 2. Our opponent is most likely holding a 3-cost instant or sorcery that the Electromancer will enable. With this information, we want to remove that from the game to slow our opponent down. Cast Down awaits our Goblin Friend. We draw a second Vivian. Not very helpful at all, but that is life. As stated, we blow up the Goblin with Cast Down, and we then swing for 4 and pass our turn. Our opponent lava coils our Branchwalker. Sad day. May he or she rest in peace in lava. Again, no lands for our opponent and they pass turn. We draw Jade Light Ranger. No land for us either, but our turn 1 elf allows us to play a card that gives us 2 explorers. We play the Ranger and hit a Crisis. We don't need another, especially with no blue lands. We put him in the bin and explore again and draw a land. We are in great shape now. We play our land and pass the turn. Lava Coil again? Oh, come on. Well, to the volcano with you, Ranger. No lands again and off we go. We draw Karn, so let's play Karn. We use his +1 ability and our opponent chooses to give us either another Llanowar or a Breeding Pool. Looking at our land situation, giving us Llanowar would be a dead card since we are tapped out. We also have not played a land, so giving us a land would be helpful. And our opponent gives us land. Vivian, I'm coming! We play Breeding Pool, tapped, and pass. Our opponent finally gets a 3rd land. He plays Chart a Course and then Opt. Clearly finding the right card is problematic for our opponent. We draw another Find Finality and play our Lady Vivian. We +1 her and choose Wild Growth Walker. Putting 2 Explore triggers on the bottom of our library is unfortunate, but Wild Growth gives us the best long-term potential. We +1 Karn again and give our opponent a choice between, drumroll please, 2 Overgrown Tombs. Land isn't bad. We'll take it and play it tapped and pass. Our opponent plays another Electromancer followed by a cheap Charter Course. Well, shoot. And then he shocks our elf. Oh, come on. We draw another Walker and then Vraska's Contempt the Electromancer. Eye for an eye. Haha. We then +1 Vivien and choose a Jade Light to enable our walkers. +1 on Karn comes next, and our opponent can choose an Assassin's Trophy or a Viv to give us. This is a no-brainer. We have a Vivien out there, so giving us another is a dead card. So of course they give us the removal. What? Well, no complaints here. We now have too many cards and we choose to discard Vivien as we have one on the board already. Our opponent plays a land and a big Crippling Drake. No worries, we have Assassin's Trophy courtesy of our opponent. We draw a Watery Grave and burn the Drake. Our opponent goes and finds an island and puts it on the battlefield. We play a Walker and choose to shock the land to get our second Walker out. This is to set up a Jade Light next turn for big life gain and counter increases on the Walker. We +1 Vivien and grab another Ranger, and then -1 Karn to bring a Llanowar back to get some extra mana. I probably should have grabbed the land, as that would have been more efficient. Our opponent sees the writing on the wall and decides game 2 will be better for him and decides to concede. On to the sideboard. We don't need much. Our deck is very strong against Izzet. We have tons of removal and our mid-late game is just better. I decide to throw in Thief of Sanity. I love this card, and the ability to remove good cards from our opponent's deck is fun. To accommodate this, I remove 2 Karns and 1 Crassus. Good to go. Game 2 will be going second. Let's take a look at the opening hand. I love this. 3 lands with all of our colors is awesome. A Fine Finality to fetch our creatures back, a Llanowar on turn 1 again, a Thief of Sanity so we can manipulate the opponent, and a Vivien to push us over the edge. Our opponent mulls down to 5. Ouch. And scries and keeps the card on top. Our opponent leads with a tapped land and passes to us. We draw a forest, play a forest, and play a Llanowar Elves. Again, playing Llanowar turn 1 helps set us up for our mid-range faster. If Llanowar stays, we can play Vivien on turn 4 instead of 5. Our opponent plays a mountain, and then shocks our elf. Ah, come on, man. The burn is real. The elf will be missed. Moment of silence for our boy. Okay, enough of that. Not a big deal. Wasting a shock on a Llanowar means it is not our face or a threat we care more about, like Thief of Sanity. We draw into a perfect turn 2 play, the Merfolk Branchwalker. We play a Woodland Cemetery, then the Branchwalker. We explore and hit a land. Not terrible, but we would have preferred a +1/+1 counter in this situation instead. We are pretty set in terms of land. Our opponent starts the turn by playing Radical Idea. They must be having issues again as they are now out of mana. An island comes out and they pass the turn. We draw a Wild Growth Walker. I completely misplay here. I should have shocked in the Watery Grave and played the Thief of Sanity. Instead I play a Swamp, forgetting I have no blue mana. With the lack of choice, I play the Wild Growth Walker. I swing in for 2 and pass the turn, a little more sad than I was before. Our opponent plays an island. He then plays an Electromancer. Uh-oh. And then Lava Coils our Walker. Gosh darn it, all my creatures are at the hottest party, a volcano. Our opponent then passes the turn. We draw a Drowned Catacomb. We play it and then play the Thief of Sanity. This becomes an immediate threat. We want to hit as many times with this as possible so we can run their threats out of their deck. I swing in knowing that 2 damage will get through as our opponent does not want to lose the Electromancer. As expected, and we get no blocks and we get 2 damage through. Our opponent swings in for 2. We are not blocking as we want the Thief ready for next turn. They then play Crippling Drake, which will shut down our Thief. However, we have a land and Vivien. We can use Vivien's -3 to destroy the Drake. We draw a Walker and play a Forest. We bring out Vivien and use her -3 to get rid of that Drake. A little burn medicine, return to sender. In my excitement, I make a bit of a misplay here. It's not horrible, but by swinging with both creatures, I lose the ability to protect Vivien. The Thief's ability triggers and I can choose from a Mountain, a Beacon Bolt, or a Sulphur Falls. The obvious choice seems to be the Bolt, but looking at my graveyard, I have no instants or sorceries in it. Clearly hindsight is 20/20, as I don't really realize this, and I choose the Bolt assuming it will have a bit of value later. Our opponent plays another Drake. Not having an immediate way to deal with the Drake presents a small issue. Our opponent then swings and kills our Vivien. A bit unfortunate as I could have protected her. Our opponent then passes the turn without land again. We draw another Thief. I actually do have a way to deal with the Drake on board. The unfortunate side effect is that I will wipe the entire board. With a Thief and Walker in hand, I decide to do it. I shock in Watery Grave and play Finality. I give the counters to the Thief, knowing that it does not matter, and destroy the board. I then pass the turn, 2 mana ahead of our opponent. Who invited all the dang Drakes? Our opponent plays another Drake. I'm starting to feel a little pressure now. They pass the turn with no land again. We top deck of Vraska's Contempt. Magic is so easy. We play that, remove the Drake, and play nothing. Gosh darn it, another mistake. 2 mana open and a 2 mana card in hand. No reason not to play this. We pass the turn foolishly. Our opponent plays a Tormenting Voice and is able to hit his 5th land. They then play a Discovery and draw again and expend almost all of their mana. We draw another Vivien. We choose to play Vivien, +1 her, and reveal a Hostage Taker. I decide on Vivien over the Thief because she presents a lot more utility in the moment. With Hostage Taker, we can now answer a big threat by taking it. Our opponent plays a land and then Radical Idea, still searching through their deck for an answer. Another Discovery, continuing to thin the deck. Finishing with a Chart a Course to draw and discard. And then shame on me for not noticing this. They had put an Arclight in the bin during all of this and I missed it. Because that was the 3rd instant or sorcery, Arclight comes back to the battlefield with haste and swings at Vivien. We draw a Jade Light and play the Hostage Taker to borrow that Arclight. I finally use my 2 extra mana to play the Wild Growth and then +1 Vivien. We have the choice between Jade Light and 2 lands. We choose Jade Light to enable our Wild Growth Walker. Our next turn we'll have 2 Jade Lights to make our Wild Growth Walker really pop. Our opponent plays a land and then another Radical Idea for more draw. Lava Coil again. The pain is real. Hostage Taker gone and Arclight goes back to the battlefield. Another Lava Coil. Walk her down! Walk her down! So frustrating. We draw another Hostage Taker and I decide to play the Beacon Bolt to get rid of the Phoenix. We use the remaining 3 mana to play a Thief of Sanity and then +1 Vivien. On the reveal we get 2 lands, a Branch and a Branchwalker, and a Jade Light. We choose a land to help us enable if we get further into the game and play it tapped. Our opponent plays an island and then Beacon Bolts our Thief. Oh, the humanity. I can't keep anything on the board. Our opponent then jumpstarts a Radical Idea and discards their last card. Another nothing draw, so another jumpstart Radical Idea with a discard. With that, Arclight comes back and swings at Vivien, removing her from the board. We draw an Assassin's Trophy, which is a nice bit of removal. We play Hostage Taker and take the Arclight once again. We then play Jade Light Ranger and explore twice. Boom. The finisher. We see a Crisis and keep that one twice on top to make our Jade Light a 4/3. Our opponent plays a Chart a Course and then jumpstarts their 3rd Radical Idea and again discards a card. We draw the Crisis and then Decisions. Last time, we held the Phoenix and we lost it after our Hostage Taker was removed. Then again, playing our Crisis may end the game quickly. I choose to be a little more conservative and load up the board with multiple threats. By playing the Arclight, I can also play the Jade Light. First though, I go to combat to see if there is removal. My opponent shocks the Arclight, sending it back to his graveyard. 6 damage comes through. In the second main, I could have chosen to play Jade Light. I find it better to hold mana open for Assassin's Trophy in case a Ral comes down. Foreshadowing. And on cue, there he is. We'll let him resolve and then send it to the bin. Our opponent does get a land out of it, but with 2 cards in hand, no big deal. With Ral being blown up and answers to all of their answers, our opponent is frustrated to no end and they concede. A bit of a grind, but this is what this deck wants to do, and another great victory. Thank you again for watching this episode of the Arena Sanctuary. Have tips, suggestions, or feedback? Please leave a comment down below, and follow us on Twitter, and connect with us on Facebook at Arena Sanctuary. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. The Arena Sanctuary is part of the Creators Quarters community. For more great Magic content, click on the playlist link in the top right.